Hello, everyone, and welcome to match number 7 of the Glimmer Gauntlet. We have Adara running Ruby Amethyst and Stephanie running Amber Emerald. My name is Brandon, also known as B Squared, and I'm joined by Dan from Hobbies and Happiness.
You did it to me again, Brandon.
What do you
did
mean?
it. You
What do
did
you
it
mean?
again. All right, let's rewind 5 seconds. Hello, everyone. I am Dan from
Yes.
Hobbies and Happiness.
There we go.
I have to match Brandon's energy. I'm excited to be here. How are you today?
I'm excited to be here. For anybody that doesn't know what you're watching and you just clicked on this video, this is the Glimmer Gauntlet. The Glimmer Gauntlet is a tournament put on by the Glimmer Gang. It's a charity event where they picked 15 Florcana content creators, randomly gave them an ink pairing of one of the 15 different ink pairings available, and asked them to make a 60 card deck out of rare cards and lower. So no super rares and no legendaries. And the prize for winning this tournament, each player picked a charity of their choice, and whoever wins the tournament, all of the proceeds go to that charity. So if you guys are interested in donating to this really awesome cause, the donation link is in the description. I'm really excited to get into this. Like I mentioned before, we have Stephanie on Amber Emerald, which is a pretty popular color in the sense I've seen it being played in a lot of aggro matchups during Rise of the Floodborn. I also saw lots of discard available in these decks. You really have to look at these decks in an interesting fashion because you can't play super rare and legendary cards. So there are some really key cards in these colors that aren't available to play. And then Adara has the infamous Ruby Amethyst, the raid boss of Lorcana so far.
What do you mean, infamous? I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, yes, never mind.
It's what's even worse, Dan, is it's just as bad in this format.
What do you lose?
Exactly. You don't lose much. You lose Lady Tremaine's. There's no Madame Medusas. There's no Maleficent Dragons, but the Be Prepared's still there. The Maui's are still there. The Madame Mim and Merlin package is still there. The spell books are still there. Like almost everything that is Ruby Amethyst is practically still available to build. So,
Yep.
I mean, I don't feel like I have to do a lot of guesswork in what I would expect Adara to bring to this tournament.
That's correct. The only thing I'll say really quickly is I really like how you introduced Stephanie's color pairing. You said it's Amber Emerald, and it's a really popular ink combination in that I've seen it played before. All right, that's got to be my favorite way I've ever heard a color combination being introduced. I'm gonna take that.
I mean, it was. I saw tons of Mufasa being played with Amber Emerald and Rise of the Floodborn. Unfortunately, Mufasa's a legendary. Yeah, Green Fasa. So it can't be played in this format. But there's a lot of discard in both of these colors. I feel like that could be something really strong. We've seen that there's some really strong aggressive cards in here as well with, I think it was like Pain and Panic. You have the Queen's super rare, so you can't use the Queen, can you?
Pain and Panic were like, that was because I played Green Fossa for a bit during Rise of the Floodborn. I enjoyed playing that deck. It was a lot of fun, and probably my favorite turn 2 into turn 3 play was I think it was Pain into Panic, or was it? Yeah, it was Pain into Panic. Yeah. That was my favorite thing to do because like that just you quested for a lot out of nowhere. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really, really liked the deck as well. I played it a lot at League. It was kind of my throwaway deck at League. You know, I'd bring like a really try-hard deck.
Wait, does that mean you threw it away? Is that
I didn't. No. I didn't throw it away. It was more like I don't feel like trying, but I'm just gonna play some Lorcana for fun. We're gonna put cards on the table, and if my opponent can stop me, they win. If they can't stop me, they don't.
Yeah, that my deck for that style of situation was Ruby Amethyst.
Fair. That's also a deck that
I didn't want to think, so here we go. I'm just gonna
exactly
and make no friends and say, guys, and I got told you're no fun to play with. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. You know, it's not your fault that the deck's broken.
Not my fault they printed Be Prepared. I literally okay, before we get to this game, because this is fun, before we get started, I have to quick story time here. I literally had someone tell me I felt bad. But then I also didn't feel bad because it's a card. When I played Be Prepared, I don't know if my opponents had seen the card yet. And so when I played it, they read it. They literally looked at me and said, "Well, that's no fun." I'm like, I'm sorry. Do you see what you did, Steve and Ryan?
Yeah.
Someone told me it's no fun. That's what Ruby Amethyst is. It's no fun. All right. No,
Yeah.
I'm good.
It might not be. But I will have to say, Adara is one of the sweetest, nicest
She
Lorcana
is.
community members that I know. So if
Absolutely.
anybody decided to say, you know what, I'm not going to bring the most
Yeah.
broken deck possible into this tournament, it's probably her.
And Adara is the person who I can see playing that card and just going, "I'm sorry, I don't want to do this. I'm sorry."
Yeah, she would definitely be apologizing for it. She's too sweet.
100%. 100%.
But I'm excited to get into this matchup. I don't feel like there's a ton to say about these decks that we haven't
Nope.
already said. Ruby
Correct.
Amethyst is Ruby Amethyst, and Amber Emerald. I would expect some discard or some aggro, to be honest with you. So
Correct.
I think we're just gonna get
I'd
into it.
I'd be very surprised if we didn't see that inking, and we see starting off inking a Pascal. Are we gonna ink Pascal to play Pascal? I mean, this is kind of a
Oh,
better play.
okay. Inking a Pascal to play Maleficent. This is a little bit aggressive. You
Uh-huh.
usually don't see this in more control type
Correct.
Ruby Amethyst decks. So
Correct.
Adara may have taken a more aggressive route to this. It looks like Stephanie's going to ink a Neverland, so she's playing a couple locations. I think that's really interesting. So
Ooh.
she inks a Neverland to play Neverland. I actually kind of like these turn one plays, playing the one drop location, especially
Mhm.
into a Maleficent, because it's that Neverland's probably going to gain 2 or 3 lore just on its
Yeah.
own, because
Yeah.
Adara's not going to want to challenge into it with the Maleficent biding her time. And the location is just going to sit there and passively gain lore as the turns go on.
Mhm.
So we'll see what Adara decides to do on turn 2. She's of course
Yeah.
going to quest with Maleficent. Why wouldn't you?
Quest. Yep. Yeah, because again, when Stephanie plays that location, it's saying, "Hey, you now have a choice to make. Are you going to quest with that Maleficent, or are you going to swing in and let me gain my lore unconditionally with that Neverland?" And honestly, I mean, if I'm Adara, I mean that's what Maleficent is there to do, is to gain you that early lore.
Yeah, we see the LeFou come down for Adara as well to ready the Maleficent. Another little bit of an interesting tech. I don't think I've seen LeFou in very many typical Ruby Amethyst decks. This is starting to look a bit more aggressive as a deck, a little bit more
Mhm.
of an aggro deck, or an
Yeah.
aggro version of Ruby Amethyst with those LeFous. I
Yeah.
imagine she's probably playing Pinocchios and a couple other high lore characters if you're trying to keep them safe with cards like LeFou.
Mhm.
But we sort of see Stephanie respond
Yep.
with
She
the
responds in
Enchantress.
kind. Yeah.
Yeah.
She responds in kind with Enchantress, which honestly that matches very well with the LeFou, because again, with Enchantress, she's great in early game scenarios because she tends to trade up. She can trade up very effectively into a lot of 2 and even some 3 costed cards as
hmm
well. Honestly, one of my favorite things is if I'm playing Enchantress and my opponent drops a Madame M. Fox,
Yeah.
for example, I'm happy to trade into that because Enchantress, I believe Enchantress states on her when she's being challenged, she gets +2 strength. Is that correct?
Yeah. When Enchantress is being challenged, she's essentially a 3-1. And like
Yep.
you said, especially in Amethyst, there's so many things that just have 3 willpower. That's kind of where they stop.
Uh-huh.
Specifically, Madam M Snake, Madam M Fox, that we see very popular in Amethyst decks. It
Mhm.
trades with those, which is great. If you can stop Amethyst from gaining too much value from those cards, being able to trade with multiple characters,
Mhm.
that's good for you. But we see Adara, she doesn't really have anything to challenge other than Neverland. It probably doesn't make sense right now because between LeFou and Maleficent, you only have 3 strength. Neverland has 4 willpower. Instead, she's going to say, we're just going to try to stay ahead a little bit. We're going to quest for 3. and we're going to
Right.
gain 5 and maybe see if we can outrace Stephanie or at least keep up. Stephanie's putting on a little bit of pressure. We do
And
see
now
her ink.
Now,
Go
now
ahead. Go
real,
ahead.
real quick, Brandon, but before we get too far, we did see Adara play probably the most popular Amethyst song, which is Friends on the Other Side. So, Brandon, I do I have to hear you sing Friends on the Other Side. I have to hear the lyric. Let's hear it. Let's hear your deep voice sing Friends on the Other Side. Come on, let's hear it
All
right
right. You
now.
ready?
Here we go.
We have friends on the other side.
All right, not too bad.
That was
Not
my
too
best
bad.
attempt. That was my best attempt.
That's okay. That is not a bad attempt. Very well done. I got to give you a standing O for that one because honestly, I was expecting a little higher voice, but you got down to that lower register pretty
Yeah, man.
well.
Yeah.
Pretty well.
Yeah. Dug deep for that one.
And I that was okay. Easter egg. Come on, people. Who else heard that? He dug a little deeper for that Friends on the Other Side.
Yeah, there you
There
go.
you
You
go.
caught it. You caught it.
Very well done.
Yeah, Adara drawing a couple cards with friends on the other side, keeping her hands full, which could be good into a Amber Emerald deck. We haven't seen very much discard, but I mean,
But
there's
look at
plenty of
what Stephanie has on board now.
yeah,
Look at what she was able to do.
yeah. Adara's certainly going to need some answers. Stephanie's decided to go pretty wide, playing both a Simba and a Lilo next turn, putting a lot of lore on board, also protecting this Enchantress, saying, hey, you thought you'd be able to trade with the Enchantress next turn with your LeFou, but I'm going to put Simba up there. And again, LeFou only has 2 strength, so you're not going to be able to do that.
Stephanie says, no, 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 because I have the Simba Protective Cub, one of the most annoying cards in all of Amber, if you ask me. I can't tell you how many times I've sat across the table from an Amber player, and on turn 2, after dropping a Lilo, say, all right, here comes Simba. Oh, no, no, please,
You
no.
know, speaking of really annoying cards,
Yeah.
we see Adara quest with Maleficent and bounce it with Madame M. Fox, deciding to take out the location first. I really like that instead of trading
Yes.
into the
Yep.
Simba.
Yep.
And I think deciding to quest with the LeFou as well, but just
Mhm.
getting the Neverland out there saying, I don't want you gaining any more passive lore. We're going to place the Maleficent back down that we just picked up, keeping it,
Right.
or readying it so that it is safe. And now Stephanie has to stare that fox down, knowing that
Yep.
whatever she exerts next turn, unless she has
Yep.
a way to bounce the fox back to Adara's hand
Right.
or get rid of it, and I don't think there's really many ways to do that in these colors, that fox is running into something.
Yeah. I think there's one big tip that I can really provide any Lorcana player or really any card game player. And I think people who've been around TCGs for a while would tend to tell you the same thing. One thing you need to look out for, right, is you want to be as efficient with your cards, not just your resources, but your cards. Your cards are your resources, right? And so the way you be as efficient as you can with yours, right, is especially when you're looking at your opponents, is you want to be able to trade one for one. If you can stay on a one for one card for card transaction with your opponent, that tends to keep the game even, right? But the moment you're able to trade 2 for 1, 2 of your opponent's cards for one of yours, you are ahead on card advantage. And what I see a lot of card game players do, especially in aggro to aggro matchups, is they will trade into 2 of their cards for one of their opponents. So that's something you
Mm-hmm.
definitely want to keep an eye on. And so that's why I liked that Madame Mim Fox into the Neverland. Madame Mim Fox takes no damage from that challenge, but is able to take out one of Stephanie's cards.
Yeah, and it's potentially going to take out multiple of Stephanie's cards,
Correct.
which is
Correct.
even better. Like you
Correct.
said, at minimum, you want to go one for one with your cards if you can. But how you gain leads in a trading card game is by taking 2 for 1s or 3 for 1s, even
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. And that's exactly what
Mm-hmm.
Madame M. Fox is great at doing, especially in the scenario. Adara plays Madame M. Fox, gets rid of the location. You've done your 1 for 1. Now Madame M. Fox is primed and ready to get rid of the Simba next turn so that she can start efficiently trading with her other cards like LeFou, taking out the Lilo, being able to give LeFou potentially a 1 for 1, maybe 2 for 1 in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So she's really setting herself up to do so. Stephanie's going to have to, I think, put the pedal to the metal when it comes to finishing this game out before Adara starts creating a lot of these value trades that she's going to be able to do.
Right.
We do see her play a Daisy Duck, which can, I think it's when she quests.
Whenever she quests. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
will force Adara to discard a card from hand. So
Yep.
she's creating a little bit of value there, being able to gain some lore with Daisy Duck, and then take a 1-for-1 essentially with Adara, removing a card from her hand,
Right.
racing
Right.
Adara to 20 lore here.
Right. Now, I think Adara is actually in a pretty decent spot here, board state wise, right? She does have 3 characters on board to Stephanie's 4. However, stat lines are everything. Because again, Madam Mim already took out that Neverland. She could easily send that Madam Mim Fox into the Simba Protective Cub and survive that challenge, then send LeFou into Lilo, and then either quest with the Maleficent or trade that Maleficent with the Enchantress, taking out, basically trading lore for lore, trading 2
Hmm.
potential lore for 2 potential lore. Be interested to see what she does. So she does follow that line to start, takes out the Simba. And so now, again, we talk about 2-for-1s. Adara already traded 2-for-1 with her 1 card still being on board.
Hmm.
So at minimum, that Madam Mim Fox
Oh
is gonna be worth a
man.
lot of cards
Oh
now.
man. What a card to
Yeah.
have in hand at that
We
point.
we we talk about, again, we just talked about trading resources, being efficient. Already taking out 2 of Stephanie's cards with 1 Madam and Fox, and now being able to get so much more value off of it with another Madam and Fox. That was huge.
Yeah, and
That was pretty big.
I mean, this is really scary for Stephanie too, because until that Madam M Fox on board is banished, knowing that Adara has another Madam M Fox in hand, she can just continue to do this. She can run the Madam M Fox into something and put damage on it, taking a
Mhm.
trade, then
Yep,
play the other Madam M Fox, pick that one up and run it into something and
yep,
taking the trade. And
yep.
until one of those Madam M Foxes get banished, she can just keep doing that loop over and over. Reducing Stephanie's board down to 0. Stephanie only has
Right.
2 cards in hand right now, so she's not going to have a lot to work with in response to that.
Yep.
And not only is Adara ahead in lore, she's also ahead on board, and she's ahead on potential lore on board. This is
That was a
not looking
very
good
big
for
swing.
Stephanie.
That was a very, very big swing, tempo swing, and that was a great sequence of plays by Adara's side of the board there. I mean, she followed that line that I had discussed basically to a T, but once we saw that second Madam M Fox, man, oh man, did that to me, if it, look, telling you now, looking at the board state, I think that was a very, very big swing in this game. We'll see if this game 1 follows that pattern and ends out with Adara on top, because that was a big swing of plays there, Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely think that can just be a game losing play. It like not anything against Stephanie, and she's played very well so far.
Yep.
But like when your opponent is playing Amethyst and they just have a fox into a fox into a fox into a fox infinitely, essentially
Uh
being
huh.
able to trade with all of your stuff, like what can you do against that? Even now, Stephanie deciding to trade the Maleficent for the Daisy, not even being able to use Daisy's ability to force Adara to discard a card. That
Yeah,
fox
I
is
mean,
sitting there, and Adara can just drop the fox again, trade with Daisy, and hold the fox in hand once again, and be ready to do that again.
right. I mean, Stephanie was kind of forced into that play, you think, right? It wasn't a trade in the, I mean, she didn't trade her card for her opponents in the traditional sense of the word trade, right? She just challenged into Adara's character, because now Adara is down a card. And Stephanie, she's not down a card, right? She still has her character on board. But it's interesting, right? Because, like, if you think about it, because Stephanie had an interest, she was in a position, right? Because she could have quested and still been up a card, right? Because
Hmm.
Daisy has an on quest ability, right? But she chose to challenge into Adara's character, still making Adara go down a card, but dwindling away her board presence. I think Stephanie made the correct call there. But now we see Stephanie drop Be Our Guest. Don't worry, Brandon, I won't ask you to sing Be Our Guest this time. But Be Our Guest probably, I know Be Our Guest was Jim's favorite card from the first chapter, but Be Our Guest, a fantastic way to dig. You talk about dig a little deeper. Be Our Guest dug a little deeper, dug 4 cards deep into Stephanie's deck to find Stitch Covert Agent. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I mean, Emerald Amber doesn't have phenomenal ways to draw cards, especially in rares and below. So having those be our guests in Stephanie's deck makes a lot of sense to me. Being able to just find more characters, keep your hand a little full, continue to put board presence on, or continue to put characters on the board and create board presence. So I like to play. Stephanie sees she has a small hand. She's gonna need stuff to work with to respond to Adara's board state right now, especially because Adara is applying pressure in multiple axes right now. She's applying pressure with Simba, having 3 lore, being able to gain a lot of lore if she wants to. She's also applying pressure with Fox, knowing that she has the Fox in hand, that she can play and bounce the other Fox to just challenge the Daisy and
Dude,
take it out.
dude, this I was just thinking about this. Like, this is kind of nuts actually in this kind of format. Just to have a fox into a fox into a fox into
Yes.
a fox,
Yeah.
that's kind of nuts. I mean,
Yeah.
because we've already we just saw it. I mean, oh my goodness, Brandon, this is this is bananas. This is literally bananas.
Yeah. This is just one of those. I mean, it's one of those games where Ruby Amethyst just shines. Like, what do you do against this scenario as Stephanie? Like and here I think she just
I
scoops
think she's
here.
conceding now.
I
Yeah.
think she's saying, what do I do when you
What
have
do I do?
Fox and Fox? You
What
know,
do
there's
I
nothing
do?
that I can do to that. And it's not, again, not to Stephanie's fault. I don't think there's
No,
anything that Stephanie can do to avoid that. That's just
no,
Adara drawing
no.
really great cards,
Yeah,
honestly, and having
yeah,
access to great cards in Amethyst.
yeah. That is, we talk about card games and variants, right? And some people love it, some people hate it. I think to me, variance is one of those. It's a phenomenon. It is a theory that is inescapable, and to me, it makes it so card games in general are always exciting to watch because you never know
Yes.
what's going to come off at the top. It's one of the reasons, you know we talk about other card games, right? And we talk about resource flooding or, not having resources. Anything can happen in a card game, and that's what makes it more exciting. That's what makes it to where you can have someone who isn't as experienced beat an experienced player on any given day given the right sequence of draws, right? It makes it to where games are always exciting to watch. And honestly, they're exciting to commentate as well. And we just saw why.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I love commentating this game and love commentating TCGs in general. And it's why you can even have formats like this where characters are given a random ink pairing,
Yeah.
they're given a restriction where you can't use super rares or legendaries, and you pair them up into each other. Some decks are just going to have better cards than other decks. When
Yeah.
you start creating restrictions like this, and when people aren't allowed to pick the ink colors they'd like to play, they just have to work with what they're given,
Right.
and that allows players to shine as players and how they pilot decks and how great and creative they are at deck building. I have a lot of respect for everybody in the Glimmer Gauntlet because of how hard I've seen all of them deck build and craft and brew their decks with all these restrictions. It really makes you have to think outside the box, especially when you're given unorthodox ink colors. But it's how you can have games like this where Ruby Amethyst is a really strong color, but with the right draws from Stephanie and with the right cards, and maybe with some bad draws from Adara or some unfortunate plays from Adara, this is anybody's game. Anybody can
Yeah.
win this just due to variance on its own.
Right. Right. And again, I do think in general, right? If you were to ask any Lorcana player, you saw them at a random tournament and you asked them, hey, we've got a match here. It is Amber Emerald going up against Ruby Amethyst. Who do you think's going to win? Probably 100% of the time they're gonna say Ruby Amethyst.
Yeah.
I was gonna say 95% of the time. Nah, it's probably
It's
100%
it's
of the
probably really close to 100%. I'm sure there's people out there who would give the benefit of the doubt to Amber
Yeah,
Emerald, but
yeah,
I'm sure the matchup statistics and the guesses that people would have would
yeah,
be majority Ruby Amethyst for sure.
right,
It just
right.
has all the stuff, right? Like it has
Yeah,
all the
it
removal,
does,
has all the control cards. We
it
saw
does.
so that's something we can talk about. We mentioned before the game one I thought Adara was going to go with a much more conventional version of Ruby Amethyst, one that plays
Yeah,
a little bit more towards the mid game, plays a couple Be Prepareds and Maui's, and looks to just kind of control the game, stall it out, and outvalue your opponent through a lot of those
mhm,
1-for-1, 2-for-1 trades we were talking about earlier, through cards like Merlin Rabbit, Merlin Goat, Madam Mim, Fox, and Snake. Um, but it doesn't seem to be that at all.
um,
It seems to be a very
seem
aggressive
yeah,
deck.
seems to
We
be
saw
aggressive. Yeah,
we saw
yeah,
Pinocchios, we saw Maleficent biding her times, we saw a LeFou or two. Obviously, we saw the Foxes, which put in a lot of work. But this is a very low to the ground build of Ruby Amethyst that
mhm,
looks to race your opponent to 20 while
mhm.
hopefully still creating value and outvaluing them. So I think that's a really interesting take for Adara to have on this deck. I mean, what do you think about that, Dan?
No, I agree. I gotta give props to Kawa. He's another content creator who, great guy. But in the previous set, Rise of the Floodborn, I know he was playing a lot of Ruby Amethyst aggressive, while a lot of other people were playing that Ruby Amethyst control. The one card that you don't get in a format such as this is access to Arthur. And Arthur was probably the card in that build that you don't have access to. It's and I think it's literally the only one. It's literally the only one. So you're not missing a lot. And so starting off game two, we see Stephanie again drop a Neverland. What do you think about that turn one play again?
I don't hate it. If we look back at the previous game, although it was a little bit unfortunate that Adara just happened to draw
Yeah,
amazing cards, the
yeah,
Neverland put in some work. I think it ended up gaining like 2 or 3 lore last time. And for
yeah,
a one drop, that's pretty good. That's pretty
yeah.
big. So I don't hate this, especially going first. You kind of have the room and the ability when going first to take it a little bit slower by placing a location because in the long term it's very likely to pay off. And of course,
Right.
here we only see Adara play a Pascal, which isn't really going to be too threatening to our location. So I'm imagining that Neverland is going to get probably another 2 or 3 lore before it's dealt with.
Right. We talk about stats, right? Stats and stat lines. On turn one, you've thrown out 4 willpower. Right. It's only one lore, right? But your opponent can look at that card and say, that's nothing. I can take that later. I can worry about it later. But by the time the opponent is able to do much with it, at that point, you've already gained 3, maybe even 4 lore by the time you're able to successfully and effectively deal with it. And that's why those going first, especially those one drop locations, are so, if you ask me, I want to say powerful, but I don't think powerful is the right word. I think innocuous, to be honest with you. Because once you
Yeah.
get to the end game, it's like without that 3-4 lore from that card, I maybe don't win the game. And that's what those locations can do.
Yeah, exactly. It just sort of creeps you closer and closer to 20 so that, before it gets too late, you're close enough to 20 that you can threaten it before your opponent takes over. I find a lot of times. And
Right.
it's so easy for your opponent to prioritize what you're doing on board, especially if you're playing characters that really need to be answered on board, ones that
Mhm.
have 2 or 3 lore at a time or have a really strong ability. Your opponent has to look at that character and say, okay, this is the bigger threat right now than this Neverland is. But if that Neverland's gaining lore after lore after lore passively, it's very easy to forget just how
Can
much
get out of
work
hand.
those
Yep.
locations are doing and get out of
Yep.
hand.
Yep. And we see Adara again drop another 1/1. Yes, it's a Simba quest for 3 lore, but that strength and willpower aren't going to do much with that Neverland. So that Neverland now able to gain a second lore. I'm interested to see what Adara is going to be able to do on her turn 3 to see if Stephanie is going to be able to gain a third lore, because again, it's every turn Adara ignores that card. Stephanie's able to tick up, gain a lore, tick up, gain a lore. So I mean, yes, Simba, a great card in his own right, but he is only just a 1 strength and 1 willpower character.
Yeah, and so I think right now, if I were Stephanie, I would want to set up a board that allows me to start reacting to Adara's board, letting the things like Neverland do its thing, gain lore passively, but seeing that Adara's taking a really aggressive early game like this, playing the 1/1 Simba with 3 lore, you know that you're probably not going to be able to keep up with that on your own. So you
Yeah.
want to start setting something up so that you can respond to it if she doesn't have ways to protect it. Now, being in both Amethyst and Ruby, Adara has a lot of ways she can protect these cards with
Yep.
LeFou that can ready the card up. We saw, or maybe with Fan the Flames. She can also use any of the Madam and Fox or Snake lines to bring a character back to hand after she quests with them so that Stephanie can't challenge them. But I do like this Peter Pan play from Stephanie because this means that she'll at least be able to challenge the Pascal since Peter Pan is evasive and Pascal is evasive as well. So she knows she'll be able to answer Pascal as well. I'm wondering if we'll see a bounce coming in. Okay, no. So we see a LeFou dropping down, readying the Simba, saying, Adara saying, I'm not going to let you get rid of my Simba just yet. I'm going to ready the Simba. I'm going to put even more pressure down, another 3 lore worth of pressure between the LeFou
Mm-hmm.
and the Maleficent, keeping everything readied and say, I'm going to race you to 20 and I'm going to make it really hard for you to deal with my board.
Yep. Yep. And if I'm Adara, I'm feeling very, very good right now because stat lines. Peter Pan. That's what I have to say about Peter Pan. Is I don't like his stat line. I believe he's a 3/2. I think he's a
Yes.
3/2/1 with evasive. So if he challenges into Pascal, he'll have a damage marked on him, and he's only gonna have 1 left. I mean, you're not getting a lot of value out of that Peter Pan. But again, he does have evasive, but it's he's got a rough stat line if you ask me. It's just rough.
It's definitely a rough stat line and normally doesn't trade very well. I think it's fine here because Pascal only has the 1 strength. Peter Pan can trade with Pascal. You've done your 1-for-1, right? We talked about this earlier. And then if Adara drops something bigger that needs to be dealt with, Peter Pan has that 3 strength. In the previous matchup, I think
Right.
we saw that it was difficult for both players to kind of react to the other than the Madam and Fox, but primarily because the Fox has 4 strength, right? Like there's
Yeah.
pretty much anything that Stephanie plays, Fox is going to be able to banish because of that strength. And kind of the same thing with Peter Pan. Obviously, you can't do all the crazy stuff like you can with Fox, bouncing it back to hand and
Yeah.
creating essentially infinite value. But Peter Pan should be able to take a pretty good 2-for-1 trade here, being able to trade with Pascal, and then using that 3 strength and saying, hey, I know I'm going to be banished after this happens, but I get to take out a pretty valuable character, even if it's just the Simba, even if it's something
Yeah.
with only 1 strength. You take
Yeah,
a 2-for-1 there, and I think it's fine.
there's two things that happen on Stephanie's side of the board that are interesting to me. She just quested out with that Peter Pan, right? Which because here's the thing. I don't think Stephanie wins this race right now because she only has 4 lore on board, including her location. Adara has 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's tied right now. It's 5-5 with each player's lore total. Um and so I think if I were Stephanie, I think I would have challenged into that Pascal as much as I don't like it. That's that's what I think. That's what I think she should have done there. Because again, she has to play to Adara's board because I think in the long game, Stephanie, I think Adara wins this in the long game. Like that's the thing about Ruby Amethyst is it's so resilient, a color combination, and it wins those long matches. There's really not much you can do. There's not a lot of color combinations that can withstand that can hang on to a game as long as Ruby Amethyst. So the opposing colors have to try and slow that down. And the other thing I'm interested on your take on is the blue. I don't know if I would have exerted the blue there. I probably would have thrown. I would not have put blue in that bodyguard stance. But we see here, it doesn't look like it's going to matter because Adara's like, I got 7 lore on board. Vroom, vroom, here we go. Stop me.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think Adara just has to be answered, right? With her board
Yep.
state. I'm
Yeah.
also surprised that Stephanie didn't challenge the
Didn't
Pascal
challenge. Yeah.
because there was more lore on board, and you have access to challenging the Pascal with Peter Pan.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned earlier, that opens you up to making 2-for-1 trades later with the Peter Pan staying safe and being evasive himself. Um, it's Stephanie has a very weird board state right now, and I don't know if it's because it was just unfortunate draws or what's been happening,
Right.
but she has 2 bodyguard characters on board with an evasive character, which is
Uh-huh.
kind of redundant, maybe. I don't know if that's the right word, but the bodyguard characters, when exerted, they're not going to protect anything because if everything has bodyguard, nothing has bodyguard, essentially.
Right.
You
Right.
can't challenge the Peter Pan unless you have evasive. Adara's really not looking to challenge anything anyway with the amount of lore
No.
pressure that she's putting on board. So
She's
it's a
able to
little bit
generate so
interesting.
much lore.
Yeah, I don't know if Stephanie just didn't have other characters to play than Baloo because Baloo
Right.
also has 0 willpower. So Baloo's not going to be able to do anything against Adara's board unless Stephanie has cards that can give Baloo some strength. So,
Which it looks like she had Painting the Roses red, and I think she targeted the blue with Painting the Roses
okay.
red
Okay.
to buff up the blue. And that's one where I will go ahead. I forced you to sing a song, Brandon. So I will now do my best interpretation of "We're painting the roses red. We're painting the roses red." There you go. All right. All right. We did it. Good job. Good job, guys. We
Good
did
job,
it.
Dan. That was great.
But
I
like
don't know that.
that's actually a great card to pair up with blue, because again, Painting the Roses red does replace itself in hand,
Mhm.
and like able to use a 0 strength character to put some pressure on your opponent is great as well. But right now, again, now we look at the lore total 12-6. It goes over to Adara. She's ready to quest out for 4 to go up to 16. I don't know. What do you do if you're Stephanie here, Brandon?
I'm praying if I'm Stephanie because when Ruby Amethyst gets up
Oh
to
no.
those numbers like 16, you just have to hope that they aren't drawing the cards that gain lore instantly or
Right.
cards like Queen's Castle that's going to passively gain 2 lore every turn and
Yeah.
have 7
Yeah.
willpower. While I don't even know, I don't even think, okay, no. So Stephanie has exactly 7 willpower on board and she could use all of her cards on board to take out the one location. That's not going to be enough. The location with so much willpower against Stephanie's low strength stuff, it's going to be really difficult for her to answer. I don't think there's a rush character in Emerald or Amber. I mean, goodness. That's
Yeah.
such a strong play from Adara. I'm having a hard time thinking of any. Oh
Oh
no.
boy.
Oh
And
no. Oh, that's
wow.
brutal.
That is so brutal.
Adara's not
Oh
nice. I take
no.
everything back.
Man. Brandon, explain to the viewers what just happened there.
Okay. So Adara just played. Okay, she played Queen's Castle and decided to move Maleficent to Queen's Castle, which makes sense when a
Step number
character's at
1.
Queen's Castle. If it's still there at the start of your turn, you gain a card for every character at Queen's Castle. Adara's just trying to draw cards. Makes
Yep.
sense. She
Surprise, surprise. Ruby
quested
Amethyst trying to draw
with
cards.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
She quested with Maleficent. No surprise there. All
Right.
things are normal. And then she plays. I can't even read the card. What's this card's name?
All right. So it's from Tangled.
Is it I Have a
I've got a
Dream?
dream.
I've got a
I've got a
dream.
dream. I've
I've
got
got
a
a dream.
dream. All right.
And
We
this
now we can
card
do a duet, guys. In all honesty, who wants to see a duet by Dan and Brandon? Let us know in the comments, and maybe we'll
let
get it
us know in the
going.
comments and like the video or dislike it if it was
Yeah,
horrible.
whatever,
I don't
whatever
care.
you want.
But I've Got a Dream says you can ready a character at a location and then you gain lore equal to that location's
Yep.
lore.
Yep.
So usually playing a location, you have to wait a whole turn before you
Yep.
gain its lore. You have to hope your opponent doesn't have an answer. I don't know that Stephanie has much to answer this anyway.
No.
But Adara said, you know what? I'm going to put even more pressure on. I'm going to put myself all the way up to 17 by not only gaining 2 lore instantly with Queen's Castle, but we're also readying my Maleficent so
Yep.
that you can't challenge it and get rid of it. And
Mhm.
I don't think Stephanie had the answer,
No.
unfortunately.
And that is why you heard both of us respond in that way. I saw that card come down. I'm like, oh no.
It's over.
Yeah,
Oh
Stephanie, our
man.
hearts go out to you.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this could have really been any ink pairing against Ruby
Yeah.
Amethyst, and it
Yeah.
probably was going to struggle. You know, like Ruby Amethyst, we mentioned it at the beginning of the video. It's just one of the strongest ink combinations in the game. You can
Yeah.
draw cards, you can remove cards, you have high willpower characters, you can protect all your cards by readying them, you can gain lore instantly. I mean, what can't this ink color do? This ink color
Yeah.
do?
Nothing. I mean, I think it can
They can
do
do everything.
everything.
Yeah.
Because again, we saw the Queen's Castle come down, right? Queen's Castle, like, if you ask me, it's the best location in the game. Like,
I would agree.
it's not even close. I've heard people say it's a broken card and it should never have been printed. Um, I can understand the argument. Let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I think in an interview not too long ago, we heard Ryan say sometimes they create cards and they tweak them a little bit to be a little bit strong because they want people to get excited about them. I don't know why they keep only doing that in Amethyst. It's a little weird design philosophy to me, but Queen's Castle is one of those cards. Just a
Yeah,
really strong
exactly.
card.
Yeah. Now, and the other thing that I will say is the rough thing that Stephanie had to deal with in building her deck is a lot of Amber and Emerald characters. They struggle with strength. A
Yes.
lot of those characters have low strength. Some of them have higher willpower, but they struggle with strength. Again, we talk about stat lines and how much they're valuable. They're just for whatever reason they don't have a lot of them going around in those colors.
Stat lines? Yeah, they don't have much of those
They
in
they
those
they don't.
colors.
I mean, to be honest though, Simba is probably one of the best 2 drops that any color
Mhm.
any deck running those colors could do. And now we see it in Steel because Steel needed that kind of help, you know?
Yeah, yeah. That's
But
why I kinda
it tends to
liked
struggle a lot.
the Painting the Roses Red tech from, Stephanie, because knowing that you're not gonna have characters that can challenge for
Mhm.
very much strength, that at least gives them a little bit of a boost. Unfortunately, it didn't really help her in this matchup. I'll be honest, I don't know that there's much more that Stephanie could have done,
No. No.
in this matchup.
You're right. I mean, Stephanie put on a valiant effort. And you talk about painting the roses red. I do like that as a tech card. It does replace itself in hand, but it does feel bad when I have to add 2 strength to a 0 strength
Yeah,
character to be
yeah.
able to effectively not trade. Well, no, in that instance, yes, it is a trade because I had to spend a card in hand to do that. Right? I
Mhm.
still have a I still may have a character on board, but I had to spend a card to do that. And when she did that with Baloo, it's another feels bad because Baloo's a great card, but Baloo, you tend to see Baloo von Brunwald in aggressive decks that doesn't challenge, but that just sits there and then quests, and then says, "Okay, opponent, you deal with it, because the moment you do, I'm going to gain 2 lore."
Yeah.
So
And
that was it was just a rough position for Stephanie to be in, but she was forced into it.
Yeah, I think that is what Stephanie's deck was trying to do. Was So it was trying to be the aggressor. It was trying to be the aggro deck. Basically everything that I saw that Stephanie inked or played told me that, even with the Peter Pan that gained lore, moving at locations.
Yeah.
I think she was really trying to go for an aggressive deck. And unfortunately, and to my surprise, Adara decided that when she got Ruby Amethyst, she was also just going to go for a very aggressive package
Yeah.
that, unfortunately for Stephanie, Ruby Amethyst can just protect all of their aggressive characters
Yeah.
much easier than any other color can, either by
Right.
readying them or bouncing them back to hand.
Right.
So unfortunate for Stephanie on that one.
Mhm.
But I do have to say, anyone that's watching so far, I appreciate you watching this far. I hope you appreciated the match. I want to remind everybody that this is a charity event. Adara will be moving forward in the Glimmer Gauntlet bracket. If you guys want to donate to the charity event, that link will be in the description. Just as a reminder, the winner of the entire Glimmer Gauntlet, their charity is that they pick is the one that will get all the proceeds. So do that if you feel so inclined. If not, just give this video a share, give it a like, give it, comment what you liked most about this video. What was the most surprising or exciting thing in the match that you appreciated? If you want any of the deck lists, the deck list will be down in the description as well. If you're interested in Adara or Stephanie's list to see it a little bit further, see what they were cooking up. I think it's always fun to see what these content creators decided to build when given such restrictions. There's a lot of really cool things you can do, and it really makes you think outside the box without any super rares or legendaries.
Also, comment below who has the better voice, Dan or Brandon.
Yes,
And
yeah.
also comment below if you want to see a
Who
duet.
would you rather serenade you if given the option, or both of us in the duet? Do that also. But
Whoever donates the most to the to the
don't
gauntlet.
sign me up for this. No, I'm not agreeing to whatever's about to come out of Dan's mouth.
Ask me later and maybe we'll think about it.
I'm going to end this before Dan can come up with anything crazier to say. You can find everybody's socials in the descriptions. Thank you everyone for watching the Glimmer Gauntlet match. Please follow the Glimmer Gang on Twitter at GlimmerPod for all the updates and info on the event. With that, we were Brandon, also known as B Squared, and Dan from Hobbies and Happiness. Glimmer on.